What's up, everybody? This is Mark from Ichiban Games, and I'm going to teach you how to play Alchemazam in less than 20 minutes. Please know that you can find the game rules in every little detail to answer any question in the videos below. They're in 4 parts, which is labeled Alchemazam Tutorial. With that said, you can play Alchemazam on Untapped.in for free or Tabletop Simulator. And remember, the Ichiban Games Discord will be the best hub to find Alchemazam players. So click that link in the description and go there, make some friends, and let's play the game. Before we get started, we need to go over this disclaimer, which this video was made for teaching purposes only. In the future, it will be updated. This game is in its alpha stage. All information may be subject to change. All art you see is proxy and used as placeholder. Some art you will see in the video I own the rights to and is original by the artist that is made. Some art, however, I do not own, which once again is only used for placeholder and teaching purposes only. All art credit goes to those artists. Alchemazam is a hybrid of an expandable card game, trading card game, collectible card game with resource management aspects. Players are wizards and or alchemists dueling against each other. It is a fun game that gives the player creativity, all the while being a complex yet interactive game that is easy to play. The way to win Alchemazam is either 1. You reduce your opponent's life total to 0 or under by having creatures attack your opponent, or use spells to go and hurt your opponent as well. The other way to win is by the resource win condition, which is 3 treasure troves and 3 arcane tomes that reside on your tableau at the beginning of your turn. Or an alternate win condition, which can be any kind of card that has a special effect that lets you win. So what do you need to play the game? Well, first you'll need a deck of 45 Alchemazam cards. Next, you'll need some Alchemazam resource cards. Then after that, something to keep track of your life total, poison counters, and any other type of counters. Dice are usually always the best. And most importantly, you're going to need an opponent. So grab a friend and have them play. So now you need to construct a deck. There are a ton of different unique cards to choose from that give every player the ability to craft their own strategy for winning. Let's go over the types of cards that would be in your deck. First, there's creatures. These are cards that will do combat and attack a player. Then there's items, which are cards that are not in combat but let you do certain abilities. Then there's equipments. Equipments are cards that you can attach to a creature to make them stronger. Next are enchantments, which are cards that you can put on the field or creatures to do continual effects. Then there's spells, which are cards that have a one-time effect that can be used on your turn. And then there's instants, which are cards that have a one-time effect that can be cast on any player's turn and as a reaction to a player's action. Cards that are played on your field are known as fixtures, and enchantments, spells, and instant cards are known as incantations. When it comes to building your deck, you can have as many cards with the same card name as you want in your deck. However, it must be within the limits of what's called the threshold. The threshold has to do with the rarity of a card. You can find out a card's rarity by the symbol of the set located at the top right or bottom right corner of the card. The color of the rarity will go as follows. Black is common, green is uncommon, yellow is rare, and red is ultra rare. Decks must consist of at least 20 common cards, which you can have as many commons in your deck as you wish. You then can have up to 25 uncommon cards in your deck. And after 30 cards in your deck, you can have the next 15 cards be any combination of rare and ultra rare. Alright, so you understand the threshold, but what is all the information on the cards themselves? For that, let's break down the card's anatomy. Each card in your deck has a card name, a hierarchy, which is the breakdown of what the card is and is associated with, a casting cost, which is the resource requirements that are needed to play the card, a set symbol, which shows the set that the card is from, including the card rarity, an information area, which tells you what the card does when played or on the field or elsewhere, and flavor text, which isn't important to the game, it's there just for fun. Many cards, like creatures or equipment, also have a status showing attack, defense, and special defense. Attack is the first number, and it's how much damage a card does to a player or creature. Defense is the second number, and is how much damage a card can take from physical combat. Special defense is the third number, and is how much damage a card can take from non-physical damage before its defense gets damaged. Creature cards will always have their stats on the top right of the card. Some cards have a slightly different look. Cards such as equipment have its stats on the bottom right and the set symbol at the top. Also, unique to the equipment cards, there's an area that is called the equip cost, which a player must satisfy the number by using that many resources to equip the equipment. Certain cards, like spells or instants, are different where they do not have a status area on the card. Now you know the anatomy of the cards in your deck, but you need to know about the resource cards. They are found in the resource area, which all players in a game can take from. These are cards that will help in the casting of cards in your deck. They have an information area just like cards that you have in your deck. The resource cards come in different forms. There's regular resource ingredients, which are gold and glyphs, and there are upgraded resource ingredients that are treasure troves and arcane tomes. There are also special ingredients that are unconventional resources, that are runestones, that are elemental resources, that are diamonds, emeralds, onyx, pearls, rubies, and sapphires. All the unconventional resources can be used to do special effects. The other cards that you'll come across are token cards. These are cards that are just generated by different means. They can come in many different forms, which are objects, creatures, equipment, and more. Token cards are not found in your deck. They come from outside the game. So now you know all about the cards, you need to learn how to cast them and know how to get the resources to do so. Resource cards can be found on the side in separate piles for each ingredient. Every turn, in what is called the resource ingredient phase, a player may either do one of the following actions. They may take a gold or a glyph from the pile, or they may meld, which is if they already have 2 gold, they can exchange them back to the pile for a treasure trove, or exchange 2 glyphs back to the pile for an arcane tome. Players cannot take a resource from the ingredient pile, then meld at the ingredient phase. They can only do one or the other. All other resources, such as runestones and elemental resources, are received by playing cards and other events throughout the game. Any resources that a player receives that is not during the resource ingredient phase comes in turn on their tableau. Those resources will be ready to use next turn. Now let's talk about casting cards. In this game, everything is a resource. This could be regular and upgraded ingredients, or even life points, cards in your hand, sacrificing creatures, and more. To play cards in your deck, you need to cast them out for the resource cost that the card demands. Cards will show a number next to the symbol or the text for the casting. You use the ingredient, meaning you turn the ingredient on your tableau sideways to cast it. This Skeleton Warrior card takes 2 gold to cast, so you use 2 gold to cast it. Here's 1 and here's 2. Turning those resources, we are able to cast it out. However, it could be cast out another way. When you have an upgraded resource, it can take the place of a common one. Treasure troves can take the place of gold, and arcane tomes can take the place of a glyph. They both count as only 1 resource each. For this card, we can use a treasure trove instead of a gold, and then we could use the other gold to cast it. Like this. Some cards, however, have red numbers in their casting cost. If a number is red, that means you need to spend the resources to cast it. To spend a card, you must put back the ingredients from your tableau back to the resource pile to cast it. This card, Fireball Blast, costs 2 glyphs needed to spend to do so. We spend 1 glyph, and then we spend the other. And with that, the card is cast. However, we can lessen the amount of resources that we lost by casting cards with upgraded resource cards. When it comes to spending, upgraded resource cards can take the place of a common resource by turning it, just like we would if it was used. The upgraded resource will not go back to the resource pile. Turning a treasure trove may count as spending 1 gold, and turning an arcane tome may count as spending 1 glyph. To cast this card, we will turn the arcane tome as if we were spending a glyph, and then we will spend the other glyph to go and cast the card. If there ever was a red number next to a treasure trove or an arcane tome, that is when you would spend it and send it back to the resource pile. Also, if there is a card that says the word sacrifice, that means it specifically must be that card without any substitute. In a casting cost, if you see red numbers next to the word cards, that means you need to discard your cards in your hand to the graveyard. And if you see red numbers next to the word life points, that means you need to subtract life points from your life total. Resources can be spent to activate creature abilities. Those abilities will tell you what you need to satisfy the casting cost. A player cannot use or spend any resources if they are not casting a card or activating an ability. Also, one more thing. Remember that equip cost that we talked about with equipment? All you need to do is use a common or upgraded resource to go and equip that equipment to a creature. So now you know how to build decks, how to get resources, and cast cards. The next thing you need to do is set up your play field. In front of you, there will be a tableau area where the ingredients for casting will be. And above that will be a player's field area where all the fixtures will reside. The deck is located on the right or left of a player, and below is your graveyard. Next to your graveyard will be the limbo area for banished cards. When a card is destroyed, it goes to the graveyard, as well as any card attached to that card, except for equipment, which stays on the battlefield. When a card is banished, it goes to limbo. Other cards that are attached to it may also go to limbo, but usually go to the graveyard. Any equipment attached may go back to the field. Each player will have 25 life. Players will shuffle their deck and draw 5 cards. Throughout the game, there's no maximum hand size for a player, and a player can have more than 25 life. Players also have an area for poison counters, but they won't have any at the beginning of the game. They only get it during the game, if poisoned. At the start of the game, players choose who goes first. That could be by flipping a coin, rock, paper, scissors, or whatever other method that they choose. Now that you're ready to play, all you need to know now are the phases of your turn and what you can do on them. The first phase is the ingredient win condition check. That is where if you have 3 treasure troves and 3 arcane tomes, you win the game. The second phase is the draw phase, where you draw a card. The third phase is the first upkeep. That is where cards all refresh back to an active state, being in the vertical position. Then you may choose if cards are magical, empowered, or normal, and then there are counters, and then there are triggers that may happen. The next phase is the resource ingredient phase, where you get your gold, your glyphs, and if you wish to go and meld for an arcane tome or a treasure trove. The next phase after that is the main phase. This is where you can cast some cards and do some activated abilities. The next phase is the combat phase. This phase also has subset phases within it. The next phase is the second main phase, which, like the first main phase, you get to go and cast cards or do abilities. The next phase after that is your second upkeep, which upkeep counters happen and poison damage triggers. The last phase is the end phase, where all creatures heal and then the turn goes to your opponent. There is something special to note about when you cast a creature. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, they have something called stasis, which means they cannot attack or perform any activated abilities. But it can block if able. Players can only play cards on their turn unless they play cards with an instant or a keyword called sudden. This is due to what's called priority. Priority means that there's a chance that the other player may be able to respond, and that is usually if they have an instant or if they have an ability that is an instant ability. Responses can only be from the first main phase and up to the second upkeep. With that, we need to talk about something called priority and the chain, which is when a player casts a card, it goes to the chain of events, also known as the chain or the stack. After that card is cast, a player may respond by playing a card or ability, putting another card on top of that chain. When no more cards can be played, the chain resolves with the last card played resolving on the chain first, then the card or ability prior to that, and so on. Here's a scenario of the chain. Player 1 has a skeleton warrior with a defense of 2. Player 2 plays Judgment Strike, which would do 2 damage to player 1's skeleton warrior. This would be the first card that is on the stack. But player 1 plays Dispel, which would be the next card on the stack. If this is the end of the chain, that means that Dispel would go off first and the skeleton warrior would survive. Here's another scenario. Player 1 has the same skeleton warrior. Player 2 plays Judgment Strike to try and kill it for 2 damage. Player 1 plays Dispel to cancel that Judgment Strike, but Player 2 plays Fireball Blast onto the Skeleton Warrior, making the stack bigger. Ultimately, Skeleton Warrior dies. Here's one last scenario. Player 1 has the same Skeleton Warrior. Player 2 plays Judgment Strike. However, Player 1 plays Threat Removal on the stack. The stack resolves with Threat Removal, removing the skeleton out of play, so Player 2's Judgment Strike has no target, making that spell fizzle. Basically meaning it doesn't work and it goes to the graveyard. Skeleton Warrior comes back to the field unharmed. We've covered pretty much everything on a player's turn except for combat, so let's do that next. Combat is where players have creatures attack a player to reduce their life total. It is broken up into subset phases that will go as follows. First, there's Declaration of Combat. Then there is the assigning of any creature-to-creature combat linking. Then there's assigning attackers and target attacking. Then the opponent declares blockers. And then damage initiates through preemptive, normal, and then final damage. Damage happens at those three speeds where preemptive hits first, normal hits second, and then final hits last. When declaring attacks, selected cards will attack at the same time. Attacking cards will always attack the player unless they have target attacking. Target attacking attacks can attack any card or player. Attacks are a physical attribute. Blocking a card halts all damage that the card would give to a player. You can block with multiple cards. Cards with targeting that get blocked result in what's called a standoff. The most important thing is attack versus defense when it comes to damage. The attack of a card subtracts the defense of a card. Check out the combat scenarios. We will go over a couple in a moment. There's a few things to note about creatures for combat. Creatures that enter the field have something called stasis, which means they can't attack until your next first upkeep. Creatures can't block if they are turned. A creature will block first, then damage will occur in another step, meaning if you play a card that can evade that damage, that creature could survive. The damage will not go to the player because it was already blocked. Creatures can multi-block, which damage is delegated. The damage a creature receives stays on that creature until the end phase, which then they heal. Here is a scenario of combat. Player 1 has a Skeleton Warrior with an attack of 2 and defense of 2. Player 2 has a Goblin Scout with an attack of 1 and defense of 1. Player 1 attacks. Player 2 then blocks, making no damage come to the player. Then damage happens to the Skeleton Warrior and hits the Goblin Scout for 2, and the Goblin Warrior hits the Skeleton for 1. The Goblin Warrior having 1 defense dies, and the Skeleton Warrior having 2 defense lives. Let's say that these cards have the same stats of 2 attack and 2 defense. Player 1 attacks. Player 2 blocks. Both would do 2 damage to each other, resulting in both depleting their defense, thus killing both. If there is an instance in combat where creatures have the same stats of attack that is lower than the defense of both creatures, they both bounce off each other and survive. Both creatures will still have the damage on them until the end phase. Lastly, on cards you will find an array of attributes, empowerments, and abilities. For a more detailed list, check out the links in the description of this video for the full Alchemazam tutorial videos. As a quick rundown, these are things that will help creatures have advantages. Attributes are usually keywords that normally don't need activation, creatures just normally have them. Empowerments are ways that creatures try to be unblockable to an opponent's defenses. Flying above creatures on the ground, hiding and being stealthy, or being phantasmic through magic are the 3 ways that this happens. Abilities come in the properties of physical, alchemic, and magical. These can be activated by cards entering the field, triggered effects, or activating cards. There are also effects that happen just because cards exist, and even some that depend on other cards on the field. Some cards will link or ride other cards to become stronger units or do effects that they can't do alone, making for strong attacks and awesome magics. And there are even abilities of cards fusing together to make bigger, stronger creatures by combining the attack, defense, and special defense of all its parts. Or creatures that may morph, evolving into something totally different by placing a card up on top of it, becoming a new creature. And there you have it. You can play a game of Alchemazam. Remember, for any extra questions, you can check out the fully detailed rules linked below in 4 video parts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification bell for more videos. You can find the card database and rules on the Google Drive, and you can play the game for free on untapped.in or play it on Tabletop Simulator. And also join that Discord. You can meet others in the community that play Alchemazam, and also you can check out other games at IchibanGamesOfficial.com. Thanks, and have a good day.